Hello everybody, Stevie again. Welcome to my video number 3 on sport coaching, steps to success. This particular video I want to talk about sport coaching planning. Now I know it might not be the flavour of the month for many coaches, but planning is very important. So much so that people who fail to plan to fail, as far as I'm concerned. So it's important to get a feeling of what's involved in the planning processes. Whatever sport you're coaching in, be it junior sport, youth development, amateur sport, semi-professional, professional sport, whatever chosen sport is your passion, some element of planning needs to be involved. The higher you go in levels of coaching, the higher the need for more planning and more specific strategic planning, long-term planning. But some people are very good at it, some people are not very good at it. Some people walk and talk on their enthusiasm and their motivation. They don't really plan ahead, and often they can get into problems when they're trying to plan to coach a certain game or coach a specific tournament or whatever it might be. Players or athletes can get turned off because they either get bored, fed up, they're not enjoying the training sessions or whatever it might be. So it's important that you get a grasp of the planning processes so that at least you have a good understanding of what you should be looking at the very least when it comes to your coaching roles. Okay, so just introduce you to a little quote which I think I quite like. Sport coaching is an art that requires sound planning skills. For those of you who are coaching at the moment, or people who are aspiring to coaching, coaching is an art, it's a skill, it's a profession for some people, but it also is a learning experience, and that learning only comes through experience and trial and error and practice, ongoing practice. So the more you can learn about planning, the more effective you can become as a coach. So I want to go through this video and just harp on a few key points in regards to the planning processes, and provide some models or techniques that you can use and adapt in your own coaching roles and coaching tasks. And once you've learned these practices and techniques, it will help you to stay focused and also be in a better position to manage your athletes and get the enthusiasm and the development you're requiring. Okay, so I spoke in the second video about the importance of having a philosophy. I also spoke the importance of having goals and objectives. Now, part of your planning process is to also understand your philosophy and your goals and objectives. That should be the first key stepping point to developing plans for your coaching roles. Now, let me just be honest with you. I've been in certain coaching roles myself, and I've been in positions where I just haven't had the time to put plans together. I've been obviously involved in my family life and working life, and trying to coach after work, and youth development was one of the strong points which I was focused on for many years, and it's not easy to sit down and have the time to actually plan ahead. But obviously the more higher the level of coaching you're at, the more need for more strategic planning, and that planning exercise can be day to day, from week to week, to year. So you have to fit the planning exercise into the type of role and coaching role you're actually adopting at this point. How far you go, that's a judgment you've got to make yourself. But if there's no planning, you really are on a pathway to failure, because I do honestly say this with some experience, that you will get caught out. So it's best to take some time, if you can find the time, to just sit down and plan with some other people who are close by, or maybe even people you coach with, and spend that quality time in getting together and getting your thoughts out and your objectives, and and writing these objectives down so that they don't lose them and they're there for the future. Okay, effective sport coaching steps to success. Planning is so critical. Fortunately, I can pass on my experience here, and both in the field of coaching, but also in my MBA studies, which obviously I had to plan ahead 6-7 months to do my assignments, and I realised the importance of planning due to that study programme. When I did sport management as well, I had a fairly strong components of sport management was looking at coaching styles, looking at the coaching plans and objectives and strategic plans that sport and organisations put in place. That can be quite in depth and quite complex in lots of ways as well. So you've got to sit down and think about the types of role you're doing and the types of plans that need to be made, and document everything that you're looking to put into place down the track. Okay, so if you look at, I mentioned the philosophies of different coaches, and Alex Ferguson, Rick Charlesworth and Phil Jackson in the first video. But if you consider the planning exercise of Alex Ferguson, he was very astute when it came to planning, and I think I mentioned his philosophy about focusing on the values and principles and development of youth players. But he also had a plan, different types of plans. He had a 5-year plan to bring youth players into the first team, the higher level, and he also had a 10-20 year plan to build a club into what it became very highly successful. So he had different plans for different reasons, and I think that's important for you to take on board, is what types of plans do you actually need. If you need to have a planning for planning sessions for your training for the season, if you're a competitive coach, have you got them scoped out before you go and start the season ahead? Because if you can get all this information and get it all planned out and documented, it saves you a lot of time in the long run, and probably a lot of heartache, because when you're coaching athletes or sport participants, then they can come easily bored, and it's lots of times you'll get grievances or issues arising because of the quality of your training sessions or the quality of your planning. So let's just move into a few of these areas. Knowing full well you can't just run along on enthusiasm and instinct. You have to plan ahead, and you have to understand that them plans need to be specific to what type of coaching role you're doing. So the 5 P's, if you can remember this statement, it's always stuck with me for many years, because it's sort of drummed into me at an early level in my sport management degree, and I looked at it and thought, yep, it's quite simple to remember, and it pops up every now and again in my life. And it's not just a case of sport, it's in other things socially and family life as well. So it's a good little acronym to keep on board, and that means proper planning prevents poor performance. So whatever your goals and objectives are, make sure you plan ahead, because proper planning prevents poor performance. And I'm sure you've got your own experience of that yourself, which you can share with others, but keep that in the back of your mind at all times as a coach. The other thing that's very important to understand is you're always, as a coach, sports coach, you also need to always look for new knowledge. And hopefully this video and the following videos will give you that new knowledge. And also have fresh ideas. When you're coaching a specific team, for instance, you always need to have new ideas, because you're not just coaching one person, you're coaching 12, 10, 15 players. In a sport, it can be very demanding and very stressful if you've not planned ahead and got fresh knowledge and new ideas. Players and athletes can become very bored very easily, and they can also be very destructive. And in some cases, you could even lose your job because of it. So it's important to think ahead, plan ahead, and be strategically thinking all the time what's coming up down the track. Okay, so a couple of the scholars I mentioned in the earlier video, also sports psychologists and sport management consultants, are quite open and honest about what's needed to be an effective sport coach. And that is that sport coaching programs need to be planned ahead, and they need to be planned in advance and written down. So you can't just keep them in your head and run from session to session or coaching program to coaching program. They need to be written down and be specific to the sport and specific to the level that you're coaching at. If you're coaching youth development, you can't be saying, well, I want to plan ahead and I want to make sure we win the league, or we win this tournament, or we win this trophy, or whatever, when at the end of the season or the end of the program, the athletes haven't learnt anything or developed, their character, their traits, or their skills. So in a sense, you've been a failure in that respect, because you failed to plan ahead and be specific of what you were planning for. So having a planned strategy of attack should entail a process of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and who with and where and when, so that you can entail a process of guided improvements, and you're not getting confused or overwhelmed at certain times because you get caught out. So it's very important to plan ahead and have this all written down as how you're going to put this process into place. Now, planning also always needs to be situation specific. If you were coaching an athlete, maybe a kickboxer coach, have you got specific guidelines and a process to follow for that particular person to develop their character, their traits, their skills, their knowledge? Because in this case, it's a one-against-one situation, and it's situation specific. If you're planning for a team, there's a lot more involved, and there's a lot more needs to understand players and how they think and how they react and how they behave and their personalities, and you've got to take into this consideration all these other inputs when you're coaching at certain sports and certain levels. But I wanted to bring in Rick Charlesworth here because I found it very interesting in his experience as an Olympic gold medalist coach with the Hockeyroos. He made a very specific point about planning, and he said that if you must always aim for quality of practice. And what he means by that is that you must always try to aim for the highest level of quality in your practices, whether it be coaching a kickboxer, whether it be coaching an individual cricketer, or someone at youth development, or someone that's trying to score more goals or tries than the next person. You always have to find the quality of practice to help them achieve that. And that might be situation specific. Again, if you want to teach a centre forward how to score goals, there's no point in trying to teach them how to defend. You need to be situation specific and set up training exercises and plan ahead to involve them practices that can help them do that. So aiming for the quality of practice also keeps people enthusiastic, it also keeps people involved, and it keeps people wanting to look forward to the next time they're trained and the planning is a major part of that, planning ahead. But you also need to plan ahead to meet your goals and objectives. And I said in the first video about having a philosophy, having goals and objectives, set them up, write them down so you know what they are. You need to be very clear in your thinking as a coach. And that means that if you've set your goals and objectives and you've written them down, how are you going to achieve them? Do you need specific resources? Do you need specific planning situations that involve other people? Do you need facilities? Do you need human or financial resources? All these things need to be planned ahead, because you might have great ideas, you might have great understanding of what you want to achieve or your philosophy, but if you haven't got support systems in place, you're highly likely going to fail because you haven't planned ahead for them. A couple of the coaches I mentioned earlier, Alex Ferguson and Rick Charlesworth, also I'd say it's important to be consistent in your approach. In other words, you set your philosophy, you set your goals and objectives, but be consistent in regards to implementing them. And that means that you can't just keep changing your mind every month or so, or doing different things which you set in the first place as your set goals and objectives. You have to stay consistent, stay focused. Which sometimes is difficult to do when you've got pressures and stresses and demands from athletes. It can easily sway you away from your goals and objectives, and believe me, I've been there a few times. And that's something that you need to be mentally tough about, to stay focused. And it's a hard task sometimes, but it all comes with experience, it all comes with practice, and the more you coach, the more you learn, and the more you plan, the more you have a better opportunity of doing that. But you also need to provide frontline leadership, and that means you need to be standing at the forefront of your athletes and your players or your individual athletes, and don't hide away, but also, you know, this is the plan, this is the objective, but I'm going to support you as well and show some leadership. Because I mentioned the area of trust earlier. If you haven't got that trust, it's very difficult to coach, it's very difficult to lead people. But if you're a good planner and you plan ahead and people can see your planning skills, believe it or not, they want to stick around because they know you've got a strategic mind and you're thinking ahead down the track. And they're more likely to want to be involved with the coaching process and being yourself as a coach as well. I've come across many coaches who have been very disorganised, and to the point of where I've always wondered how they maintain a coaching role. But once again, it's the level of sport. The more higher the level, the more professionalism needed. But lots of people, you know, in certain amateur sports, for instance, will come from work and they're straight into a coaching role because they enjoy doing that, and that's great. I think it's marvellous that people want to, you know, be involved and pass on their skills and experience to others. They just want to have fun. Some coaches, like I said earlier, the coaching style, it might be around submissive nature, where they just want to have fun, make no plans, and let things just flow. But in all honesty, you'll come up unstuck sometimes, because whatever type of role you're achieving or working in at the moment, failure to plan means you're going to plan to fail. So it's important to keep that at the back of your head. And planning is a skill, but it also takes a bit of time to sit down and do it. So how do you do it? I suppose that's the question is leading into that, is how do you actually plan a coaching program or whatever you want to do? Well, it's important to get second opinions, it's important to get consulting advice. People who know about coaching at the high level can provide some input, but it's also important to document everything. In my past experiences, I've been sort of a bit slack in that respect. I've run from week to week in coaching programs for the season, and sometimes I've been caught out. Sometimes people said to me the training's boring. Some people said to me the training's fantastic, but it's all based upon, have you planned ahead? Have you planned your month's training sessions ahead? Have you planned 6 months ahead? These types of things do make a hell of a difference if you can sit down and plan ahead and have quality of training and keep ideas fresh in people's minds who are participating in your sport. Keep them enthused, keep them motivated, and keep them interested in what you're actually trying to achieve. So when you develop a coaching program, or you've planned out your goals and objectives and how you're going to do them, where you're going to do them, who with, what resources do you need to deliver the program, and you also need to monitor and review. And that means that just because you've written things down and just because you're presenting things doesn't always mean to say that it's going to be effective. Like I say, personalities come into sport, especially at the team level, and the higher the level, the more demands and the more pressure, so you need to keep people very well attuned, and that can only be done with discussion and consultation with other people. That might be involved a team of coaches to get around a table, exercise and scope out and plan something for the year. so that you've got these plans in place, and you've also got the effect planned as well, because you need to take into consideration time, you need to take into consideration the level of your athletes, and you need to take into consideration the goals and objectives, what you set at the start of any coaching program or coaching season or coaching an individual. So planning, I think, should involve the key principles of what, where, when, who and how. In other words, what are you actually planning for? If you set your goals and objectives, then that is part of your planning process. That's the first step that you should be looking at. Well, if I want to win this trophy this year, if I'm a team coach, how am I going to do that? When am I going to have training sessions? How often am I going to have these training sessions? Who's going to be involved with me to conduct these training sessions? Because the what, where, when, who and how can be very important in you dissecting the key needs and things you need to put in place to keep people motivated to be able to achieve them goals and objectives. I've often said in certain sports that people train too much. The how or when situation is, when do we train? If I'm a professional team, do we have to train every day? Can you plan ahead and say, well, me needs to only train 4 days a week instead of 5? Does the training sessions have to be all day? Do they need to be half a day? Do players need to have rest periods? All these things need to be planned ahead. Do you need to get guest coaches in to help you and break up the monotony? Because the how technique is very important. How are you going to coach people? People do get fed up with your voice. I've experienced many seasons as a player myself in the sport of football where I was very enthusiastic at the start. I had a great coach, got good ideas, good goals and objectives. Yes, I want to stick around, but after 2 or 3 months you get so fed up because the coaching sessions have been so boring and monotonous that I don't want to be there anymore. And that is just a case sometimes of not planning ahead at a time, or being aware of what these needs are from the players. Players need variety, they need a change of scenery, a change of voice at certain times of the season, and that means that you have to fit that into your planning exercises, because if you don't, it could fall back on you and you could end up losing your job. So planning is important. It's not only a case of short-term planning, it could be strategic or long-term planning depending on your role. If you're in a high-profile coaching role, then it needs to be strategic. And plans can be developed for all different things. Training exercises, you need to plan ahead for players. If you want to purchase players, you need to plan for the types of training you want to give to your athletes or your individuals. And you need to find the human financial resources and equipment resources as well, because you need equipment, and plan ahead for those, because if you don't, you can't just expect to run on adrenaline and motivation or enthusiasm. Athletes are very shrewd when it comes to things going wrong, and they pick up on things and they pick up on the vibes, and if they see as a lack of planning or someone that's not really planned ahead, then you do get caught out quite easily. So it's important to plan ahead, it's important to adapt to change, and it's important not to lose control, and one way of gaining control and keeping control is to plan ahead. So sport coaching planning is very important in you becoming an effective coach, and hopefully you got something from this short video. So next time I'll be talking about the next stage of the sport coaching, the steps to success. So hopefully you've got something and you'll plan ahead this time when you start your coaching exercise. So thank you for viewing, and look forward to meeting you next time. Thank you.